So let's delve into the world of cannabis and society today. Just so you have a understanding, we've already talked about the global landscape of cannabis and how it's evolving rapidly and it's impacting our laws and our equity and our social norms. So today we're going to explore three crucial aspects of this evolution. First, the war on drugs. This was a term that was popularized by the US government in the 1980s, and it has origins in earlier efforts to control drug use and trafficking. The modern iteration of this campaign can be traced back to the Nixon administration in the 70s, when the US government declared drug abuse as a public enemy. And fueled by concerns about the social and economic impact of drug addiction, the government initiated a series of strict anti-drug policies and law enforcement actions. The policies included the introduction of mandatory minimum sentences and militarization of the police and substantial funding for drug interdiction efforts, both domestically and internationally. So the war on drugs has had this profound and complex consequences. While it was aimed to reduce the drug abuse and its associated harms, it's led to a host of unintended consequences. One of the most significant impacts has been the exponential growth of the US prison population, with a disproportionate number of minorities that are incarcerated for drug-related offenses. This policy has been criticized for perpetuating racial disparities within the criminal justice system. Additionally, the war on drugs has had limited success in curbing drug abuse or the availability of illicit substances. And that leads to this cycle of punitive measures that some would argue have exacerbated the problems that they were meant to address. And the collateral damage of this war extends globally, affecting source countries and fostering violence and instability in regions known for their drug production and trafficking. And in recent years, there's been this shift in the approach to drug policy, with growing calls for drug decriminalization, harm reduction, and a focus on treating addiction as a public health issue rather than as a criminal one. Cannabis prohibition has been just a notable aspect of the broader war on drugs, with the criminalization of its use and the possession serving as the focal point of drug control efforts. And like I said, cannabis in the early 20th century became the target largely due to a combination of social, economic, and racial factors. And the demonization of marijuana was fueled by those racial prejudices and fear, with claims of its detrimental effects on communities and individuals. This led to the enactment of these increasingly strict laws, and that culminated in the Controlled Substances Act in 1970 in the United States, which classified cannabis as a Schedule I substance, and it placed it alongside drugs like cocaine and heroin. And cannabis prohibition has resulted in the criminalization of countless individuals, disproportionately affecting those communities of colors, and it's had this far-reaching social and legal consequences, even as the attitudes and the policies around cannabis have started to shift in the recent years, with a growing number of jurisdictions legalizing it for medicinal and recreational purposes. The war on drugs and the related policies just had that devastating criminal justice impact, with like I said, those marginalized communities bearing the disproportionate burden. And these communities are often low income and predominantly people of color, and they've faced higher rates of arrest and higher rates of conviction and higher rates of incarceration for these drug-related offenses. And then we have mandatory minimum sentencing and three-strike laws, and aggressive policing tactics in these areas have led to this cycle of imprisonment and stripping individuals of their rights and creating a perpetual underclass The, the consequences extended beyond the incarceration, too, as those with the criminal records often faced barriers to employment and housing and educational opportunities, and that further perpetuated the cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement. This stark disparity in the criminal justice system has led to an increased call for reform, addressing the systemic racism and adopting policies that emphasize rehabilitation and equality over the punitive measures. And we're going to discuss legalization trends, regulatory models, and international agreements in more details in another lesson. But it's important to note here that the trends, the models, and the international agreements have really played a significant major role in the cannabis industry. Social equity in the context of cannabis refers to the principle of addressing the historical and the ongoing injustices that are disproportionately affecting these marginalized communities as a result of the war on drugs and cannabis prohibition. And as an increasing number of jurisdictions legalize and regulate the cannabis industry, social equity programs aim to create opportunities for individuals and communities that have been most harmed by these past drug policies. And these programs typically include provisions for expunging prior cannabis-related convictions, ensuring that people with these prior convictions can participate in the legal cannabis industry, and providing them with resources and training and support to do that. Also, they often prioritize licensing and business ownership for individuals with marginalized backgrounds, with the intent of not only rectifying past wrongs, but also fostering economic and social empowerment within these communities. And social equity in the cannabis industry recognizes the importance of redressing the imbalances that are created by decades of drug enforcement disparities and promoting a more inclusive and fair approach to cannabis legalization. Overcoming these disparities in the industry and addressing those historical injustices is a crucial imperative in various fields, particularly within the context of the cannabis and criminal justice reform. The historical consequences of the war on drugs and cannabis prohibition led to those profound disparities, the disproportionate impact of the marginalized communities, and especially the people of color. So to rectify these wrongs and create a more just and inclusive society, efforts need to be made to expunge these prior cannabis-related convictions and ensure equal access opportunity in these emerging industries like cannabis, and promote the social equity and economic empowerment within these marginalized communities. And by acknowledging and addressing the historical injustices, we can work toward a more equitable and just future where individuals from all backgrounds have a fair chance to succeed, free from the weight of the past disparities and the prejudices. So, several initiatives and policies have been implemented to promote social equity in the cannabis business. So, for instance, many states with legalized cannabis have established equity programs that prioritize licensing and business opportunities for individuals from communities disproportionately affected by drug prohibition. And these programs often provide reduced fees, technical assistance, and training to support these aspiring entrepreneurs from these marginalized backgrounds in navigating through the industry. And expungement of prior cannabis-related convictions is being pursued in numerous jurisdictions, removing these barriers to entry for those with prior legal entanglements. And there's this growing emphasis on reinvesting cannabis tax revenue back into the affected communities, channeling resources towards education and job training and community development. And these initiatives and policies collectively aim to create a more inclusive and equitable cannabis industry while addressing the historical injustices that are associated with cannabis production. And the social norms surrounding cannabis use have evolved significantly in years. So historically, the use was stigmatized, largely due to its association with counterculture movements and fears of its potential harm. But with the growing acceptance of medical and recreational cannabis in various parts of the world, these norms are shifting. In many places, cannabis is no longer viewed with the same level of societal disapproval, and it's increasingly seen as a legitimate form of relaxation and pain relief and even entrepreneurship. But nevertheless, social norms around cannabis use can still vary widely, depending on the region and the specific community. In some areas, particularly where cannabis remains illegal, the stigma may persist, and its use can be seen as a deviant behavior. And then conversely, in areas with legal cannabis, a more permissive attitude is often observed. Public opinion has been influenced by the increasing recognition of the potential medical benefits of cannabis, as well as the economic opportunities that are associated with the cannabis industry, like job creation and tax revenue and things like that. And these changing norms continue to influence the ongoing debate about the regulation and the social acceptance of cannabis use. And the significance of data-driven cannabis policy decisions cannot be overstated, particularly in a rapidly evolving landscape where cannabis laws and regulations are being reformed worldwide. Data-driven approaches are going to allow policymakers to make informed, evidence-based decisions that consider the complex interplay of public health and safety and economics and social equity. Reliable data can help assess the impact of cannabis legalization on factors like rates of cannabis use and public safety and tax revenue and criminal justice disparities. And it also allows for the development of targeted strategies, enabling the governments to craft policies that align with the specific needs and preferences of their communities, while minimizing potential negative consequences. And in a field where public opinion and scientific understanding and industry dynamics are constantly changing, data-driven policy decisions provide the essential foundation for crafting effective and adaptive cannabis regulations that serve the best interests of that particular region. And data really plays a pivotal role in shaping effective cannabis regulations and building public trust in the process. So by collecting and analyzing data on various aspects of cannabis legalization, like I said, the rates of use, safety, tax revenue, social equity outcomes, these policymakers design regulations that are evidence-based and responsive to the needs of their community. So transparency in the data collection and reporting instills public confidence that these regulatory decisions are being made objectively rather than based on political or ideological considerations. And these data-driven regulations are more likely to adapt to changing circumstances. And that allows for an ongoing evaluation and refinement of policies to maximize the benefits and minimize the harms. And that's going to further bolster public trust. And in this way, data not only informs sound cannabis regulations, but also fosters the sense of accountability and credibility in the regulatory process, ultimately helping in building the public trust and the legitimacy of the cannabis industry. And we know that data is just this critical tool in addressing the ever-evolving trends and challenges that are associated with cannabis. As this cannabis landscape continuously shifts with changing products and consumption methods and patterns of use, the reliable data is going to provide the means to monitor these developments and understand their implications. The data is going to help us to identify emerging public health concerns like the rise of potent cannabis products or vaping-related issues. And that allows for timely interventions and regulatory adjustments. And it assists in the tracking of the economic impact of the cannabis industry, like the tax revenue and employment opportunities. And that's going to offer insights into the potential benefits and challenges. And data is also indispensable when it addresses equity and social justice issues. And that's going to enable the governments to assess the effectiveness of policies aimed at mitigating historical disparities, and also to ensure that all segments of society can participate in and benefit from the legal cannabis market. So in essence, data acts as a compass, guiding the policymakers in their efforts to adapt to the evolving landscape of cannabis and find balanced, evidence-based solutions to the challenges that it presents. So staying informed and active in the cannabis discussion is of paramount importance in today's evolving landscape. Cannabis is at the intersection of social, economic, medical, and legal debates, and it's making it crucial for people and communities to engage in thoughtful and informed dialogue. Staying abreast of the latest research and policy developments and industry trends empowers individuals to make informed decisions about their own cannabis use, be it for medical or recreational purposes, while understanding the potential risks and benefits. Additionally, active participation in the discussion can influence the direction of cannabis policy, ensuring that they are aligning with the values and the priorities of the community and addressing issues like public health, equity, and social justice. So by being well informed and actively engaged, people can contribute to a more balanced and evidence-based approach to cannabis regulation while also fostering a responsible and inclusive cannabis culture. Engagement is a powerful catalyst for shaping equitable and responsive policies in any domain, including cannabis. So in the context of cannabis regulation, active involvement of a diverse range of stakeholders, including community members and advocacy groups and experts like counselors, is going to be essential for ensuring that policies are crafted to address the specific needs and concerns of the different populations. Meaningful engagement is going to provide opportunities to solicit feedback, exchange ideas, and consider the nuances of public sentiment. This inclusive approach can help policymakers navigate complex issues like social equity and the public health and the economic development, while avoiding this one-size-fits-all solution. And ultimately, engaging ensures that cannabis policies are not only evidence-based, but also reflect the values and the aspirations of the communities they serve, leading to more equitable and responsive regulations that benefit our society as a whole. And ensuring that cannabis laws reflect the diverse needs of the community is a fundamental aspect of responsible governance in the era of cannabis legalization. Cannabis policies have to be adaptable and inclusive to address the unique social and economic and health considerations of these different regions and the different populations. This entails not only listening to the voices of the marginalized communities and understanding the historical injustices that they've endured due to the drug prohibition, but also engaging with healthcare professionals and law enforcement and industry stakeholders and advocacy groups. A tailored, community-centered approach to cannabis regulation just acknowledges that what works for one area or one demographic may not be suitable for another. And by recognizing and respecting this diversity of needs, policymakers can foster a more equitable and responsive cannabis framework. Cannabis reform represents a complex and constantly evolving landscape where there's changes in laws and social equity and societal norms, and these are of paramount importance. Navigating this shifting terrain requires a multifaceted approach that acknowledges the diverse need of communities. And staying informed about the latest research and policy developments and actively engaging in discussions and using that data-driven insight is going to be an essential step toward building a responsible and equitable cannabis landscape. And this approach not only ensures that regulations are evidence-based and responsive to the distinct needs of the different populations, but also fosters a cannabis culture that is inclusive and transparent and focused on the well-being of the individuals and the communities that are involved. Thanks for paying attention. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comments section below this lesson. My phone number is posted here if you have any questions, or my email address is there as well.